Welcome to Did You Know? RaceAware's mini history and trivia short. Make sure to give us a like and your feedback in the comments, especially if you want us to create a full episode on this topic. Now go ahead and subscribe and follow us so you don't miss any new content dropped. Enjoy!
With the United States and the Soviet Union on the brink of nuclear war, the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis was one of the tensest moments in modern history. But at the peak of the crisis, one Soviet naval officer managed to keep a cool head and avert nuclear devastation. Fidel Castro led a coup against the Cuban government in 1959 and won. Suddenly, we had an enemy aligned with the Soviet Union just 90 miles off our shore. Within 6 months of Castro's overthrow of Fulgencio Batista's dictatorship in Cuba in January of 1959, relations between Castro's government and the United States began to deteriorate. The new Cuban government confiscated private property, much of it owned by North American interests, sent agents to initiate revolutions in several South Latin American countries, and established diplomatic and economic ties with leading socialist powers. By June, the Congress had passed legislation enabling President Dwight D. Eisenhower to take retaliatory steps. The United States cut off sugar purchases from Cuba and soon thereafter placed an embargo on all exports to Cuba except food and medicine. In January 1961, Eisenhower, in one of the final acts of his administration, broke diplomatic ties with Cuba. This increased the war of words between the Soviet Union and the United States of America, which became known as the Cold War. It wasn't helped when JFK placed ballistic missiles in Italy and Turkey aimed at the Soviet Union, and also had the failed Bay of Pigs invasion happen the same year, 1961. In response to the presence of American Jupiter ballistic missiles in Italy and Turkey, and the failed Bay of Pigs invasion of 1961, Soviet First Secretary Nikita Khrushchev agreed to Cuba's request to place nuclear missiles on the island to deter a future invasion. During October 1962, the world was pushed to the brink of nuclear war. Russia had begun building missile silos and launch facilities in Cuba. To add to the effort, Russia deployed the B-59 submarine to the Caribbean. The Project 641 Foxtrot diesel-electric submarine B-59 was the flagship of a detachment with its sister ships B-4, B-36, and B-130. All subs sailed from its base on the Kola Peninsula, the Caribbean Sea, in support of Soviet arms deliveries to Cuba, an operation known to the Soviets as Anadir. The Kola Peninsula is a peninsula in the extreme northwest of Russia and is one of the largest peninsulas of Europe. It lies almost completely inside the Arctic Circle and is bordered by the Barents Sea to the north and by the White Sea to the east and southeast. Knowing ships and subs were being sent to Cuba, Kennedy announced the start of a naval blockade on ships heading towards Cuba. However, on October 27th, units of the United States Navy, the aircraft carrier USS Randolph, and 11 destroyers detected B-59 near Cuba. U.S. vessels began dropping depth charges of the type used for naval training and containing very little charge, not intended to cause damage. There was no other way to communicate with the submarines. The purpose was to attempt to force it to surface for positive identification. Messages from the U.S. Navy to communicate that practice depth charges were being used never reached B-59, or, it seems, Soviet naval headquarters. By October 27th, the submarine B-59 had not been in contact with Moscow for a number of days, and although the submarine's crew had earlier been picking up U.S. civilian radio broadcasts, once they began attempting to hide from pursuers, the vessel had run too deep to monitor any radio traffic, so those on board did not know whether or not war had broken out. The captain of the submarine, Valentin Grigorovich Savitsky, believing the war had started, wanted to launch the nuclear torpedo. After all, the submarine was being pursued by the American Navy and being assaulted with depth charges. Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov was on board the Soviet submarine B-59 near Cuba when U.S. forces began dropping non-lethal depth charges. While the action was designed to encourage the Soviet submarines to surface, the crew of B-59 had been incommunicado and were so unaware of the intention. They thought they were witnessing the beginning of the Third World War. Trapped in a sweltering submarine, the air conditioning no longer working, the crew feared death. But unknown to U.S. forces, they had a special weapon in their arsenal, a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo. What's more, the officers had permission to launch it without waiting for approval from Moscow. Two of the vessel's senior officers, including the captain, Valentin Savitsky, wanted to launch the missile. According to a report from the U.S. National Security Archive, Savitsky exclaimed, "We're going to blast them now. We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not become the shame of the fleet." There was one important caveat, however. All three senior officers on board had to agree to deploy the weapon. As a result, the situation in the control room played out very differently. Arkhipov refused to sanction the launch of the weapon and calmed the captain down. The torpedo was never fired. Had it been launched, the fate of the world would have been very different. The attack would probably have started a nuclear war, which would have caused global devastation with unimaginable numbers of civilian deaths. Immediately upon return to Russia, many crew members were faced with disgrace from their superiors. One admiral told them, "It would have been better if you'd gone down with your ship." Olga, Arkhipov's wife, even said he didn't like talking about it. He felt they hadn't appreciated what they had gone through. Each captain was required to present a report of the event during the mission to Marshal Andrei Greco, who substituted for the ill Soviet defense minister at the time. Greco was infuriated with the crew's failure to follow the strict orders of secrecy after finding out they had been discovered by the Americans. One officer even noted Greco's reaction, saying that he, upon learning it, was the diesel submarine that went to Cuba, removed his glasses, hit them against the table in fury, breaking them into small pieces and abruptly leaving the room after that. In 2002, retired Commander Vadim Pavlovich Orlov, a participant in the events, held a press conference revealing the submarines were armed with nuclear torpedoes and that Arkhipov was the reason those devices had not been fired. Orlov presented the events less dramatically, saying that Captain Savitsky lost his temper but eventually calmed down. When discussing the Cuban Missile Crisis in 2002, Robert McNamara, the U.S. Secretary of Defense at the time, stated, "We came very close to nuclear war, closer than we knew at the time." Arthur M. Schlesinger, Jr., an advisor to the John F. Kennedy administration and a historian, continued this thought by stating, "This was not only the most dangerous moment of the Cold War, it was the most dangerous moment in human history." Arkhipov continued in Soviet naval service, commanding submarines and later submarine squadrons. He was promoted to a Rear Admiral in 1975 and became head of the Kirov Naval Academy. Arkhipov was promoted to Vice Admiral in 1981 and retired in the mid-1980s. He subsequently settled in Kola, where he died on 19 August 1998, most likely by the radiation which he had been exposed to in 1969 by a submarine reactor gone crazy, and most likely contributed to his kidney cancer, and like many others who served with him in the K-19 accident. He subsequently settled in Kupovna, where he died on 19 August 1998. The radiation of which Arkhipov had been exposed in 1961 may have contributed to his kidney cancer, like many others who served with him in the K-19 accident. The K-19 accident happened on July 4, 1961, under the command of Captain First Rank Nikolai Zatyrev. K-19 was conducting exercises in the North Atlantic off the southeast coast of Greenland. At 4:15 local time, the pressure in the starboard nuclear reactor's cooling system dropped to zero. The reactor department crew found a major leak in the reactor coolant system, causing the coolant pumps to fail. The boat could not contact Moscow and request assistance because a separate accident had damaged the long-range radio system. The control rods were automatically inserted by the emergency scram system, but the reactor temperature rose uncontrollably. Decay heat from fission products produced during normal operations eventually heated the reactor to 800 degrees Celsius or 1470 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, as more and more records are released and more information is available to us, we learn more and more about our history. Because after all, truth matters.